Brace yourself for the nightmare I'm about to share. I honestly don't know the best place to post something like this, but I need it out in the open. I've told just about everyone I know, family, friends, neighbors, even a few local reporters, but it's never enough. I can't explain it, but I feel compelled to let as many people as possible know what's been happening. So here it is. It's November 2019 as I'm writing this, but the story starts way back. I'm talking over 7 years ago. I can't remember the exact year, but I'd guess it was 2012 or maybe 2013. I was in my mid-20s, working a steady job and living with my girlfriend, now my fiancée. Since I didn't go to college, I had been in the workforce for a while, and I didn't expect any big life changes. That meant I had no reason to move far from home, and so I didn't. Back then, my fiancée and I had just moved into my childhood home in the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina. My parents had generously given it to me. It's an old brick house that my dad inherited from his parents when he was around 40. Keeping it in the family felt right. Though there were some renovations over the years, you could still tell it was old, especially the brick. There aren't many brick homes in our area, so it really sticks out. I've always liked that. It feels distinct. Our neighborhood is tucked deep in the woods, and the houses are spaced far apart. Ours is the last house at the end of the street, which means we border the forest on 2 sides. And let me tell you, that forest is enormous. As a kid, my brothers and I spent hours exploring it, but we never even came close to seeing the whole thing. Some people might find that intimidating, but I've always loved being surrounded by wilderness. Plus, I've always been a bit of a loner, so having my own little corner of the earth was appealing. We'd only been living there a few months when things started to get strange. It was winter, can't remember the exact month, but there was snow on the ground. It was just after 8 a.m. on a Sunday, the one day I got to sleep in. I was heading to my truck for my usual Sunday morning coffee run when I noticed something odd in the snow, a trail of footprints right next to my vehicle. My first thought was that my fiancée had gotten up early and walked outside, but that didn't add up. The footprints led across the front yard and through a hole in the fence on the side of the house, toward the woods. And the path didn't go anywhere near the front door or windows. It went directly to the driver's side of my truck and then turned around, heading straight back into the forest. I stood there completely baffled. Who would do that? I asked my fiancée about it later, but she had no idea what I was talking about. I wish I had more detail to offer about that first incident, but it was so long ago. That's about all I remember. The next incident happened at least 2 winters later. I know for sure it was 2015, because that's the year the Panthers lost the Super Bowl to Tom Brady. I walked outside one morning and immediately sensed something was wrong. There were footprints everywhere, around the truck, near the windows, all along the perimeter of the house. The entire yard was covered in them. I'm a pretty rational person, so I didn't panic, but I'd be lying if I said I felt calm. I didn't have time to investigate since I was already running late for work, but I didn't want to leave my fiancée alone in what could be a dangerous situation. I did a quick lap around the property to make sure no one was still lurking. Then I texted her from the road to explain what I saw so she wouldn't be alarmed. I left work early that day. The whole thing was gnawing at me. When I got home, my fiancée met me in the yard. She pointed out one of the trails of footprints and said something about it had been bothering her all day. I looked more closely and realized what she meant. None of the prints had shoe treads. They were barefoot. I was stunned. Who the hell walks around barefoot in the snow? My fiancée suggested maybe it was an animal, but the prints looked exactly like bare human feet. We called my dad for advice, but he said he had never experienced anything like that in his years living in the house. He told me to grab my rifle and try to track down whoever, or whatever, had made those prints. I didn't want to, but I knew it was something I had to do. My fiancée wanted to call the police, but I doubted they would do much since no crime had technically been committed. I told her I'd go into the woods and call law enforcement if I found anything, and she agreed. That forest is massive. I told myself I'd turn back before dark. I slung my rifle over my shoulder and followed the prints for about 30 minutes. Then I noticed something that made my stomach sink. The trail suddenly split into 2 different paths. I stood there frozen, unsure which to follow. Then a darker thought crept in. Was there more than one person? I'd assumed I was tracking a single trespasser, but now I wasn't so sure. I stood there a while longer, then decided to head back. It was getting dark, and I didn't want to take any risks. On the walk home, I couldn't stop thinking about the footprints. Could someone have been walking backwards to throw me off? Had one person carried another? No explanation made any real sense. We ended up calling the police that night, but as I expected, they couldn't do much without stronger evidence. I planned to try tracking again the next morning, but a fresh snow had fallen overnight, wiping away the trail. That was the last strange occurrence that winter. In fact, things went quiet for years. We got engaged, life moved on, and we mostly forgot about it. Until last January. This happened about 10 years ago, give or take. My buddy Thayer and I had nothing going on the next day, so we figured we'd head over to our friend Lucian's place. He had just started dating someone new, and the plan was to chill for the night, maybe have a couple drinks, hang out, just unwind. Lucian was staying at his mom's condo temporarily, which was part of this quiet little complex on the outskirts of Sedona. And right behind the place, there was this dense patch of desert woodland, not just a few trees and cacti scattered around. It was a full-on stretch of rugged terrain that felt like it went on forever. This was northern Arizona in the fall, one of those rare evenings where the air is cool, the sky is streaked with gold, and everything feels calm. We cracked open some beers and wandered into the wild stretch behind the condo. Just the three of us, and Lucian's girlfriend came along too. Everyone was laughing, just enjoying the moment. Eventually we ran out of beers, so we made a quick drive to a corner store, grabbed more, and headed straight back. What we didn't plan for was how quickly it would get dark. Arizona sunsets can be deceiving. 1 minute it's golden hour, and the next it's pitch black. We had talked about maybe building a small fire, but we hadn't brought anything to get one started. We found ourselves in a clearing, kind of like a natural plateau where a few narrow trails forked off into the brush. It was quiet, still, but something didn't feel right. As we stood there joking, I caught a glimpse of someone, just beyond the mesquites. At first, I figured it was a twisted tree stump or maybe my eyes adjusting to the dark, but it felt off. I nudged Thayer and asked, "Do you see that?" He squinted, shook his head, then froze. "Wait, yeah. What the hell is that?" Sure enough, it wasn't our imaginations. There was a man, huge, just standing there between two trees, perfectly still. He was far enough that we couldn't see his face, but close enough that we could tell he wasn't wandering. He was watching, and it felt intentional. I tried to quietly get Lucian's attention, hoping to avoid letting the guy know we'd spotted him. But Lucian, being Lucian, was in full nothing-can-touch-me mode. I whispered for him to look ahead subtly, and he just shouted, "Yo, is that Bigfoot?" Like it was the funniest thing in the world. I laughed nervously, but my insides were doing flips. By that point, we were too deep in to just casually turn around. The guy was massive, not gym ripped, but just naturally large and broad. And the strangest part, he didn't move. Not even a twitch. Just stared. We tried a cautious, "Hey man," just to feel out the situation. Then Lucian, in classic form, walked right up to him like they were long-lost cousins. "Dude, we thought you were an alien," he said, doing this goofy impression of a xenomorph from the Alien movies. It was cringeworthy. Lucian's girlfriend, who had been quiet the whole night, looked absolutely terrified. She didn't say anything, but you could tell she was ready to leave. Thayer and I were racking our brains trying to figure out how to get out of there without making it obvious we were freaked. Running felt like a bad idea, but so did standing still. Then the guy finally spoke. "You guys drinking out here?" he asked. We nodded hesitantly. "Cool. I got some stuff too." He walked over to the edge where the trees thickened and picked up this battered old backpack leaning against a stump. He grabbed a beer with one hand, but with his other, he slipped something into the hoodie pocket. I couldn't tell what it was, but it gave me a terrible feeling. Looked like it could have been a blade. As he popped open his beer and came back, I discreetly scanned the area. That's when I saw it, another person, deeper in the brush, moving along the tree line like they were circling us. Definitely a person. Not an animal. Not a trick of the light. That's when it hit me, we needed to leave. Fast. I threw out a casual excuse like, "Oh man, I totally forgot I've got an early shift tomorrow." Thayer's my ride, so I added, "We should probably get going." Lucian, totally clueless, says, "What? You told me you had the day off." I gave him a look that said, "Please just go with it," and said, "Nah, I mixed up my schedule." Lucian shrugged and waved us off. "Later, dudes. Drive safe." Like there wasn't a potentially dangerous person standing 10 feet away. Thayer and I walked out quickly, not running, but moving with purpose. Once we were out of earshot, I told him what I saw, another person, hiding, creeping along the trees. That's when we knew we had to get Lucian and his girlfriend out of there. So we hatched a plan. Thayer called Lucian and said, "Hey man, your mom's outside in the parking lot and she's pissed." Lucian might not fear strangers in the woods, but he definitely feared Mom. It worked. He grumbled and cursed, but agreed to leave the woods. I don't know what we stumbled on that night. Maybe a couple of squatters, maybe a drug deal, or maybe something worse. All I know is we were lucky nothing happened. This happened maybe 4 or 5 years ago, back when I was still living with my mom just outside Asheville, in a quiet area bordered by thick forest. We weren't totally off the grid. There were other properties around, mostly small farms, but each one was spaced out by a good chunk of land. The closest neighbor was probably half a mile away. It gave us a mix of openness and solitude that felt safe at the time. In hindsight, maybe it gave me a little too much confidence. I used to go on nighttime walks like it was nothing. Sometimes right after dinner around 8 p.m., and other times way later, midnight, even 2 in the morning, if I couldn't sleep. Thinking back, that was probably not the smartest routine. But I had this walking loop that I stuck to almost religiously. The first part ran along the front side of our land and a few other farms. It was open and visible, so if anything went wrong, I figured someone might spot me, or at least I'd have enough cell signal to make a call. But the second half of the loop cut behind the properties, weaving through a dense wooded path that ran for about 1.5 miles. And that's where the strange thing happened. This one night, I don't remember the exact time, maybe just after midnight, it was pitch black beyond the beam of my flashlight. I was just about to reach the curve in the trail that would take me out of the woods and back into the open space when I heard it. A voice. Flat. Monotone. Just saying, help. Not yelling or crying. Just repeating it, help. Help. Like a robot reading a script. I yanked out my headphones and turned off my music, frozen in place, trying to make sure I wasn't hearing things. But the voice kept going. Same tone, same word. Over and over. My first instinct, stupidly, was, someone's in trouble. I was around 16 or 17 then, still in that mindset where you think you're some kind of hero. I actually started stepping forward before my brain caught up and screamed at me to stop. That's the kind of thing people don't walk away from. So I started backing up slowly, flashlight pointed at the ground, trying not to trip. And that's when it got worse, because I wasn't alone. My cat, Sabine, had followed me out like she usually did on these walks. But instead of backing away with me, she crouched low and started creeping forward, ears back, tail stiff and quietly hissing. Right toward the sound. I was whispering her name, trying to coax her back, barely breathing. But she wasn't budging. She was locked in on whatever was out there, and I couldn't just leave her. So I did the only thing I could think of. I ran forward, scooped her up, spun around, and sprinted back the way I came. I knew turning my back was risky, but I was panicking. Every horror movie I'd ever seen was flashing through my head. I half expected to feel a hand close around my shoulder at any second. But nothing happened. No footsteps behind me. No voice shouting. Just silence. I didn't stop running until I was inside our house, door locked, Sabine still in my arms, puffed up like a bottle brush. Even though I was scared out of my mind, I couldn't shake the voice from my head. What if someone really did need help? What if I'd just let someone die out there? That guilt gnawed at me. So I told my mom what happened and somehow convinced her to drive back out to that trail with me. Yeah, I know, ridiculous. But we stayed in the car, headlights on, windows cracked. We called out a few times. No one answered. There was no movement. Just thick silence and trees. We didn't get out. Thank God. The next morning, though, I still couldn't let it go. So we went back. This time, we actually walked around a bit. Just the edge of the woods near where I'd heard the voice. I braced myself for the worst. I fully expected to find something, someone, maybe even a body. But there was nothing. No footprints. No dropped items. No signs that anyone had been there at all. And to this day, I still don't know what I heard. No face. No explanation. Just that voice, completely emotionless, repeating, help, like a recording. I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone was pranking hikers, or maybe I imagined it. But deep down, I don't believe that. Something was out there. Something that knew how to sound human, just enough to make you walk toward it. And I think I was one wrong step away from disappearing. I was driving back from my friend Alara's place outside of Port Angeles, not in any rush to get home. The playlist was good, windows down, hair whipping around, and everything just felt still, like the whole world had pressed pause. I decided to take the scenic route through Olympic National Forest. I'd heard about this lesser-known trail that led to a series of cliffs with panoramic views over the valley. I'd only seen photos online, deep forest greens, misty ridgelines, and these huge, jagged cliff faces that looked carved by giants. It had been on my list for a while, and something about that day just said, why not? The entrance was easy to miss. A narrow gravel pull-off and a small wooden sign half swallowed by ferns and moss. No cars in the lot. Perfect. I parked, grabbed my water bottle, and checked the wooden trail map nailed to a post. The path I picked was marked moderate, just under 2 miles in. Seemed easy enough. I wasn't in hiking boots, just sneakers, but I figured I could handle it. The trail started wide and soft, mostly dirt packed with pine needles, winding gently through old-growth trees. Everything was silent except for the occasional bird song and the crunch of my footsteps. It was the kind of quiet that feels sacred. I passed a few mossy boulders, a stream, and some overgrown switchbacks. After about 30 minutes, the trees thinned out. That's when I saw him. At the foot of a small slope, maybe 30 feet down, there was this older man sitting on a flat rock. He looked like he'd been part of the forest forever. White hair, sun-leathered skin, and a beat-up flannel shirt tied around his waist. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting there, staring out into the trees like they were whispering secrets to him. The peaceful image should have calmed me, but something in my gut shifted. As I got closer, he turned his head and smiled. "Where are you heading?" His voice was low, almost gravelly. I paused mid-step and smiled back, trying to keep my tone casual. "Just checking out the cliffs. Never been." At first, he seemed friendly. Old guy curiosity. Maybe a little lonely. But then his smile lingered too long. His eyes didn't match it, too sharp, too fixed. He nodded and said, "You should be careful." I laughed lightly, brushing it off. "I hike a lot. I'll be fine." But then his voice changed. Went flat. "No, you really need to be careful." He said it like a fact, not a warning. Not like he was worried about the trail conditions or wildlife. Like he knew something I didn't. I tightened my grip on the water bottle. "Okay, well, thanks." I started walking past, picking up my pace a little. Then he added, "A lot of girls come out here for the view. Most of them don't come back." I stopped. He was still sitting there, but now he was staring directly at me. No smile. Just eyes that felt like they were peeling me back layer by layer. Every instinct in my body screamed to turn around, to run. But I didn't want to show fear. Not yet. I forced a smirk. "Is that supposed to be a joke?" He didn't answer. Just looked at me like he was measuring something. I turned and walked fast, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I wasn't even thinking about the view anymore. I just wanted to be somewhere else. But then I stopped again. The trail ahead was wide open. No hiding places. No sounds. And yet, I didn't hear him move. Didn't hear twigs snap or leaves crunch. I turned back, expecting to still see him on the rock. He was gone. I scanned the slope, the trees, the brush. Nothing. No footsteps. No breath of movement. Just vanished. And I hadn't heard a thing. Now my heart was in overdrive. I walked faster, then faster still, practically jogging. I kept glancing behind me, half expecting him to be there, just standing silently in the middle of the trail. But it was empty. When I finally got back to the parking lot, it was still deserted. My car was the only one there. I jumped in, slammed the door, and locked it. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trying to slow my breathing. I told myself maybe he was just some weird old man with a creepy sense of humor. Maybe I was overreacting. But then I checked my rear view. There was nothing. No movement. Just trees. Still, I couldn't shake it. Who the hell was that guy? Where did he go? And where did he come from? If I had been the only car in the lot, how had he even gotten there? I started the engine and peeled out of that lot like the forest was on fire. I didn't look back, but I haven't stopped thinking about it since. That stare. That voice. The way he said most girls don't come back. That wasn't a warning. That was a confession. And I don't think I was supposed to leave that trail. Last summer, I set out to hike a section of the Appalachian Trail, something I'd dreamed about doing for years. I've always loved solo treks through the wilderness, and this time, I wanted to challenge myself. My plan was straightforward. Park my car near the trail's end in Shenandoah National Park, hitch a ride to the trailhead near Damascus, Virginia, and hike back over about 10 days. The first few days were exactly what I hoped for. Long stretches of peaceful forest, the path winding through ridges and valleys, and the kind of quiet that resets your mind. I'm in decent shape and like to push myself, so I didn't stop often. Of course, I never hiked after dark. Each night, I'd veer just a bit off the trail and pitch my tent in a secluded spot. I've always preferred keeping a low profile when camping alone, less chance of unwanted company. Everything was going smoothly until the third night. That's when things changed. I woke up in the middle of the night with this overwhelming feeling that something was wrong. It wasn't a noise or a dream that stirred me. It was just this heavy, gut-level awareness that I wasn't alone. I sat up in my tent and looked around. Everything looked fine. I grabbed my flashlight and my rifle, unzipped the flap, and did a quick scan of the area. Nothing. Not a sound. I went back in to double-check my gear, and that's when I noticed my wallet was missing. At first, I thought maybe I'd misplaced it, maybe left it outside or tucked it into the wrong pocket of my pack. I tore through everything. Nothing. It was gone, my ID, cash, credit cards, all of it. The idea that someone had gotten into my tent, taken my wallet, and left without waking me up made my stomach turn. But the alternative, that I'd somehow lost it, was almost just as unnerving. I'm careful about that kind of thing. I tried to move on. Maybe I dropped it the day before. Maybe I'd find it down the trail. But over the next few days, more things started to go missing. One of my lighters disappeared. Then a few energy bars. My Swiss Army knife. All small things, but I knew I wasn't losing them. Someone was following me and taking my stuff. I didn't want to believe that, but by the fourth day, I couldn't deny it anymore. There's barely any cell service out there. I had no way to contact anyone for help. I considered turning around, but I wasn't confident that would fix anything. Either way, I'd be traveling alone through the woods with someone stalking me. I wouldn't make it back without sleeping at least once, and I couldn't imagine pitching a tent again, not with someone lurking in the dark. So I kept walking, and I kept my rifle close. That night, I tied the inside of my tent shut. It wouldn't stop someone determined, but it gave me a tiny sliver of comfort. I stayed awake for as long as I could, listening for the slightest sound. Eventually, I passed out from sheer exhaustion. When I woke up, everything looked untouched. But by that point, the anxiety had sunken deep. I was unraveling. Every rustle of leaves had me on edge. I started imagining things. Shadows that weren't there. Sounds that didn't exist. My mind was playing tricks on me. I remember one hallucination in particular. I stepped into what felt like an ankle-deep puddle. I felt the splash. I felt the cold soak through my sock. But when I looked down, the ground was dry. I stood there in shock. I knew my brain was slipping. Despite it all, I kept going. The nights were the hardest. Every time I zipped myself into the tent, I felt like I was sealing myself in a coffin. I kept my rifle right next to me. One night, I heard footsteps circling the campsite. I froze. My heart was racing, but my body wouldn't move. The steps eventually faded into the woods, but I didn't sleep again that night. At dawn, I packed up in a panic. My hands were shaking so badly, I couldn't even tie my gear properly. I was close to the end, maybe a day and a half from my car. I decided I wouldn't stop to sleep again. I'd hike through the night if I had to. As the sun set, I was still going. Flashlight in one hand, rifle in the other. I had never hiked in the dark before. It was terrifying. Every tree looked like a shadowy figure. Every sound made me flinch. Then I heard it, footsteps behind me. I spun around and flashed my light. I saw something duck behind a tree. Adrenaline surged. I aimed my rifle and yelled for them to come out. A figure stepped forward. It was a man, but unlike any I had ever seen. Wild hair, scratched up skin, and he was wearing a pair of my shorts, which I hadn't even realized were missing. He looked feral, like he hadn't been around people in years. He started walking toward me. I fired a warning shot into the snow next to him. The sound sent him bolting back into the trees. I didn't wait. I turned around and made a beeline for the parking lot. When I got to my car, I locked the doors and called the police. When they arrived, they told me I shouldn't stick around. I didn't need to be told twice. The hallucinations were the part that still mess with me. I didn't think the mind could create something so vivid. I haven't gone hiking since, and if I ever do, I won't do it alone. I'd never tell anyone to avoid the Appalachian Trail altogether, but I would say this: be very, very careful out there. A few years back, I was working a contract gig doing field work out in Northern California with a crew assigned to the Forest Service. We were basically plant trackers, hiking through deep redwood wilderness, IDing invasive species, mapping them out, and removing them if needed. Because we were on official contracts, we had access to parts of the park that the public wasn't usually allowed into. And yeah, the deeper you go into those woods, the stranger the stuff you stumble across. I've got a few messed up stories from that job, but there's one that's always stuck with me. There was this old day-use area we passed every day during one of our longer assignments. It looked like something out of a forgotten horror flick, overgrown, wrecked, and full of discarded junk. The road to get in had a rusted-out steel gate blocking it, but people would still drive over the curb like it was nothing and park inside. We'd see folks with dogs sometimes, or photographers taking moody shots of mossy benches. But every now and then, someone would pull up, haul something into the woods, and just not come back. At least not while we were there. Our crew lead, a guy named Yora, always told us to skip it. Said the area didn't have any known invasive plants, so it wasn't worth our time. And honestly, we didn't argue. The place gave off bad vibes. Fast forward a few months. We were reassigned to that general stretch of forest again, and one day, we got tasked with walking a narrow canyon road about 7 miles long. Guess what was right off that road? Yep, the same creepy day-use area. I volunteered to check that side of the road with 2 of my co-workers, Callan and Roan. We figured, screw it, let's finally see what's in there. We had our normal kits, manual tools like hoes, saws, and Pulaskis. I also carried a cookery knife on my belt, just for general safety. That kind of field work isn't always peaceful, you know? Wild animals, sketchy people, you name it. So we step into the area, and it's even worse up close. Rusted appliances, busted glass, metal shelving units half buried in ivy. But the weirdest part? These perfect square holes cut into the concrete, like 2 or 3 feet wide, several feet deep. We stood around for a minute, trying to guess what the hell they were for. No idea. Then we found a dirt mound. Not a small one either, like a proper, rounded, intentional-looking mound. It was covered in stones, and next to it were these crusty, stained rags. Half a skateboard was sticking out the top, and there was a wooden cross nearby. The board had something scrawled on it, looked like the word Ezrin or Esmond, maybe a name, but the rest was too faded to read. One of the guys thought it was a pet grave, but those rags looked wrong, like blood wrong. Still, we moved on, shrugged it off. We were logging plant data, so we pushed deeper into the area. Eventually, we found this hidden spot that opened into a new canyon. We confirmed it on the satellite map, totally unexplored. We made a note. Not far from there, we found a weird little building, maybe the size of a shipping container. The door was cracked open. I nudged it wider with my hoe. Couldn't see a thing, it was pitch black inside. Roan used his phone flashlight to peek in, and immediately we saw old porn mags everywhere. Kids' clothing, bedding. The smell alone made me take a step back. I didn't even process it fully before I turned and started walking toward the road. I wasn't about to hang around. When I got back to the clearing, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. A pickup truck had pulled in. It definitely hadn't been there before. It was parked way off in the corner, tucked behind some brush, like whoever was driving it didn't want to be seen. I stood there, frozen, waiting for the other guys to catch up. When they did, I pointed out the truck. Callan said the driver might be in the old bathroom building nearby. I didn't love that idea, but I wasn't about to wait alone either, so we headed over. The building was shaped like a V, men's and women's restrooms on either side, storage in the middle. The men's side had clearly been broken into in the past. Inside, same story. More porn mags, more kids' clothes, more bedding. Then we saw it. Someone had cut a hole in the wall between the bathroom and the storage room. Roan stuck his head through and looked inside. That's when shit hit the fan. I was still outside when I heard the doorknob on the storage room start rattling, then yelling. Roan shouted something I couldn't make out, and then I heard Callan slam his Pulaski into the door handle again and again. Metal on metal. Then suddenly, this man bolts out of the women's bathroom side and runs straight into the woods. He didn't say a word, didn't even look at us, just sprinted toward that little building we had just checked out. The one with the mags and the bedding and the dark. Turns out, when Roan peeked through the hole, he saw the guy crouched in the corner of the storage room, trying to stay hidden. The room was stuffed with boxes, more kids' stuff, and blankets. We didn't wait around. We radioed the nearest hotshot crew for backup. They were wildfire guys, big, serious dudes, and they didn't mess around. When they showed up, one of them brought a chainsaw, cut through the storage room door, and set up lights. What they found was worse than anything we expected. Piles of child porn magazines. More children's clothing. Blankets. Stuffed animals. A literal nest. We told them which direction the guy had run, and they followed it to that small structure in the back. Turns out, it wasn't just a shed. It extended into the hillside, a bunker. Like someone had dug into the earth and built a hidden room. And that's where it stopped for us. We were told not to go in, not to touch anything. We backed off and let them handle it. Later, an unmarked SUV showed up. Federal plates. A couple of guys in plain clothes went into the bunker. We never heard what they found. We weren't given any updates. But the next day, the entire area was taped off, and we were reassigned to a different part of the forest. We didn't argue.